Talvar looked up from his beer to reassess his party's mood. It wasn't good. Everyone was battered somewhat, tired and worn-looking from the last unsuccessful raid. There could be no doubt. They were going to have to find a proper healer if they were going to stay together as a group. Not that he was complaining about the healers of the temple, oh no. They did quite a fine job of looking after injuries, but they were not the adventurous sort. Not that they would be persuaded to leave even if they were, and expensive potions could only do so much in the field. Getting a dedicated healer was a big ask, especially in this small, out-of-way town. Talvar's troopers were distinctly not a famous adventuring outfit. Sure, he had some successes, along with a reputation for doing a respectful job of any quest, but there wasn't nearly enough to have applicants seek them out. There was the odd farmhand who tried to join up as muscle, but the truth was they just wanted out of their dreary little lives, not to risk life and limb fighting dangerous monsters. Talvar had foolishly accepted the first few when he first assembled his adventuring group, but they always absconded in the next decent-sized town or city they passed through. A crash suddenly jolted his attention from his musings, to reveal a broken clay mug that had been slammed down on the table in front of him. "Sorry!" said the burly dwarf opposite him at the table. "That was the end of the last one I could afford just now." Talvar nodded his acceptance to the apology, as the last two other drinkers present looked on in silence as they nursed their own cups. But the dwarf made a good point too. Coin was low, and they would have to take up a quest to keep themselves fed and sheltered before long, and time wasn't on their side. Without coin, they couldn't afford to hire on a healer. Without a healer, they couldn't take on the risk to earn coin. The moment of despair passed, and Talvar was about to retire for the night, when a shadow fell ominously over the little group. Despite the late hour, he was pleased to see that all of his companions had stiffened somewhat, their hands on weapons below the table. They were a good team, alert and willing to back one another despite current woes. It would be a shame to see them part ways. "Good evening," said the black-cloaked stranger. "Are you by any chance Talvar's troopers? The barkeep advised you were hiring." "Yeah, but folks with healing skills, even only as a secondary skill set, will do. Can you heal, I mean?" Talvar blurted. He hadn't meant to be rude, but equally he wasn't in the mood for time-wasters. "Certainly," the shrouded stranger replied. "I am ordained of Serenray, the healing light, and all that entails. I trust magical-based healing would be an issue. I'm no foul-smelling herbalist." The stranger's laugh was somewhat higher-pitched than expected. Half-elf, maybe? The tavern's gloom wasn't helping, but a healer Talvar needed, and a healer had doth appeared. "You would get an equal share of loot and one standard share of coin, nothing in advance." "Agreeable, but I do have a special condition that must be met before I can accept." Everyone at the table was paying their full attention now. What could this untested possibly claim in addition to fair pay? "I'm not a fighter. I can swing a sword in defense of my life if I have to, but I need someone to protect me at all times while I apply my craft. I cannot heal myself and the party at the same time. I must have this. It is a condition of my joining." Talvar thought about the odd request for a moment. As the party's leader, he couldn't do it. He would need to be wherever his skills would be needed most. That's the front line, probably. The elf couldn't do it. She had the skill, but was all flowing movement, dodging and weaving to avoid injury. As soon as she stopped to protect another, she would be too easy a target. The self-proclaimed noble could do it, but wouldn't. He would be too busy working over his powder weapons, not to mention he wasn't the sort to risk himself for others. That left the dwarf. He would be missed in the thick of the fight, but his sturdy, well-armored form would be a pretty decent bulwark to cover the healer, but he wouldn't be happy about it. Talvar looked at his companion, eyes pleading. The dwarf met his gaze, and suddenly realized what his leader was asking of him. "Fine, I'll do it, I suppose," he gruffly stated, before turning in his seat to point accusingly at the newcomer. "But you'll owe me a drink every time I save you." "Ha, agreed. If you can keep me in one piece to do so." The newcomer turned back to Talvar. "I accept these arrangements." "Welcome aboard. Kier." "Welcome, Kier. Meet us here tomorrow at dawn. We have work already lined up." The morning road brought a light fog, mild hangovers, and of course the fifth and newest member of Talvar's troopers. The day didn't reveal much new about their new companion. He was still shrouded in a full-body black cloak, complete with matching hood and gloves. No sign of any weapons or a traveller's gear, although he could have that kind of stuff beneath his outfit. Very mysterious, but so long as he can actually heal as promised. Talvar would usually take the opportunity to chat a little, see where the newcomer fit in the team dynamics, but the hangover put paid to any talk the group would normally have going. Kier certainly didn't try and get any small talk happening, either happy with his own counsel or trying to dial up the whole brooding atmosphere thing while it lasted. The top of the abandoned watchtower they were to clear was just in sight where the ambush happened. Half a dozen Tengu, humanoid avians with short blades in their hands, pounced upon the group. The whole fight was over before it really even registered in Talvar's mind, with most of the opponents fleeing after a few swipes. Either they were being tested, or they had been mistaken for unwary travellers instead of an adventuring party. Apart from a few scratches, they had hardly even been delayed. And that was where the first problem appeared. Kier refused to heal a half-decent scratch on the gunner's forearm, or any of the minor injuries at all, instead proclaiming, "You'll live," after a brief inspection of each. Some healer he was. This was not at all what he had hoped for when he assigned the newcomer on. Moved back in the pit, the party moved on. The second problem was apparent when they were a few floors up the abandoned watchtower, although to be fair, Kier had warned him of this. He was no fighter. Literally. Everyone else had now witnessed his hanging back to avoid combat at least 3 times now, preferring to wait for the rest of Talvar's troops to do all the work. Apart from disarming a single ground floor trap, he had done nothing at all to contribute so far. Not even conversation. The whole party was thinking the same thing now. This guy was dead weight. And he still hadn't healed anyone as per his claimed expertise. Whatever. He could kick him out once this job was done, Talvar thought to himself. Eventually the party made their way to the highest point of the watchtower, and the last room that needed to be cleared. The Tengu had been growing in ferocity as they neared the upper levels, but no one present had expected to find a full-blooded harpy lair at the top. Too late to turn back, Talvar's troopers threw themselves into the one-sided fight, determined to give their best regardless. All except Kier, who hung back in the doorway as always. Talvar could barely see through his only unblooded eye. He saw an elven blade lying on the floor, where it had been knocked from his friend's grasp. He saw burn marks on the wall where his gunner's powder cake reserve backup trick had gone off. He saw a heavily dented dwarven shield being torn up by sharp talons. He saw his own death loom over his kneeling form. He saw... Kier? With a burst of speed, the newcomer was suddenly in the middle of the room, T-posing with his hood thrown back and his palms upwards, glowing with a golden light. His young face and pale complexion said half-elf, as Talvar had summarized, but his deep red eyes most certainly did not. It might have been mistaken recognition, distracted by the injuries he had just taken, but his hindbrain knew the right description. Vampire. Then, in a blinding flash of yellow light, all Talvar's pain went away, and he was whole again, full to the seams of life and energy. Everyone, friend and foe, was stunned. What just happened? Everyone was recovered of the scars of battle, even the harpies. The moment passed as Kier collapsed, face first. Several things happened at once. The elf snatched up her discarded blades. The gunner hastily reloaded. The dwarf rushed over to loam over the newly revealed vampire, presumably as per the arrangement. Talvar thrust his sword through the neck of his would-be killer, and the harpies finally remembered they were not alone. The second battle went much better for the adventuring party, now that they knew how their foes fought. What had been a desperate scramble the first time around was a more fair fight. It had been hard, but Talvar's troopers won out in the end. All thanks to the vampire, who was passed clean out and at the group's mercy. There was talk about ending him, but Talvar wasn't having any of it, not at least without an explanation first. Kier had, after all, healed the party, as initially promised. Eventually he regained consciousness, and was more than willing to explain himself despite practically being held at blade point. "Ah, vampire, thank you very much. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to be outside in the daytime at all, cloak or not. I'm sorry I hid my nature from you all, but I had to be careful of judgment by those who doubt my motives. No, you're not undead now. I am a real healer, despite what you may think. That's why I cannot heal your minor injuries. The light of the goddess harms me to channel, so I can only do so when there is a real need. It's also why I passed out immediately after doing so. If you hadn't won, I would have died helpless. Why? Despite my father in darkness, I am in control of my own life, my own destiny. That's why I took a vow of peace and mercy. It's why I cannot raise a blade except in defense of my own life." "Well, you asked for a healer and I delivered." That he did, if in the most strange way possible. and he passed well enough for humans, so having them around shouldn't cause too much trouble to the party. Speaking of which, you are still in, Kier, but we don't need to feed you blood or anything, right?
It's pronounced Kier, and no, half, remember? Think of me as half human, not half vampire, if it helps.
That did help. And it did more than help. Over time, more and more foes started recognizing the bizarre suicide healing tactic as a sort of calling card for Talvar's troopers. Eventually this recognition became fame, and renown that spread far and wide, until few dared to face such a difficult to overcome group. They were not particularly hard to defeat, but none could defeat them twice in back-to-back fights.